Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. One of the biggest problems of learning English as an older person is to consistently have the motivation to learn. Certainly, when we think about the time that we have as older people, that might also be quite constrained because we get into a habit of getting up at a particular time, going to bed at a particular time, whereas when you're young, you tend to be more spontaneous in making decisions and in doing things. So, for example, the life of a student, the student can say, well, I'm not doing my studies tonight, but I can do them tomorrow morning. Whereas someone who's 50 or 60 might say, well, I just don't feel like doing this because I'm not connecting with it. And therefore, I'll leave it to a time when I am feeling connected. And there isn't any kind of set idea about when you're going to return. I mean, return to study. And I think this problem is made worse by the fact that older people tend to study alone. They have memories of school, which for all of us weren't particularly pleasant or indeed helpful. So they're very cautious about spending money to go to a school where they might be forced to do homework that has little meaning. I mean, we're all a bit like that. We've all been in situations where we've sat down in a class and we suddenly feel that we don't have any connection to it. I mean, if I wanted to pay $200 to learn how to say I have a dog, then maybe these kind of classes would be helpful. But the lack of practice, the lack of interaction with other students or with native speakers means that older people really struggle with this because people like me, for example, I need to see meaning. I need to see connection with a language I'm learning. I can't just say, okay, today I'm going to learn, let's say, for example, Finnish. I can't just decide to do that and then start learning it. I would need to either know someone there or be interested in the culture of the language. There has to be something else, something more to connect with. And that might not be the case when perhaps a 19-year-old decides to learn a language because for him it's fun to explore. He might be planning to go there. For older people, there are different scenarios and different ideas that they have to contend with. My advice today to anyone who's older or anyone who is mature, perhaps not a student, is to be easy on yourself. If you're learning a language for fun, okay, just as a pastime, it should be enjoyable. And if it's not enjoyable, then it's time for you to change the way in which you approach it. Learning is different for everyone, but certainly motivation and time are key factors. Now, I personally believe that motivation is always there. After all, if you are able to sit for 3 hours smoking a cigarette, watching TV, instead of studying English, then you're motivated to do that. But if you're neglecting your English because you want to watch TV and smoke for 3 hours, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that you're not motivated to learn. It just means that you're not motivated to learn at that particular moment. So there's usually issues with time and with feeling that you want to do something. Ritual can really help with that. Getting all your books sorted, leave them sitting on the table for you to see what you have to do. when you get up in the morning. One of the downsides of the digital era is we can't often see the things around us that we're doing because they're all on screen. And even if there's a folder on your desktop, there's a chance that you might just ignore it because after all, it's only a folder on your desktop. But if you see some real books around you sitting on the table, it motivates you a little bit more, and it reminds you as well that your language learning is there waiting to be done. Lastly, and something else which is very important, is older people often don't want to speak to native speakers. There are a number of older people that I know who just think, you know what, I'm going to do this alone. The last thing I want is to force myself to talk to someone that I'm not going to have patience with, that I'm not going to like. And on a platform like italki, I can understand a 65-year-old man trying to learn English isn't going to feel so comfortable talking to a 19-year-old girl. And sadly, most teachers on italki are young or very young. There are some older ones, but they tend to be in a minority. And so this is something else to think about when it comes to planning your lessons, especially if you're taking them online. I'm telling you all of this in the hope that it will encourage you to get back into your English. One of the hardest things is that when you fall or when you miss a day of studying, to stand back up and to begin again. But yet there has to be a way to do that. There has to be a way that you can continue your studies, because you feel guilty, you feel bad, you don't feel so good. But the commitment to learning, the promise that you made to yourself, is what brings you back to the table. But if it just comes down to you and your head and your diary, I don't think you're going to get very far. I think it's very, very important to try to reach out, involve somebody else, bring in a language partner or somebody who knows a little bit about you, who can at least ask you, how's your English learning going? Confide in a friend even. But many of us, we decide to learn. We don't tell our families because we're afraid they'll laugh at us. Or they might say, oh yeah, here we are again, another idea from our mother or father that probably isn't going to see the light of day. So we end up kind of hiding, and we're not really proud of what we're doing. And then talking to a native speaker frightens us. These are the kind of things that older people really contend with. And that mindset needs to be broken. And the way you do it isn't by trying to change the mind of your family. It's just reaching out and discovering who you are when talking to native speakers. It's a way to allow yourself to experience the joy of sharing your language and also hearing the language you're learning from somebody else as you learn how to speak it. So it's a very difficult and complicated process for older people, but that's no reason to give up. It just means that you have to be careful of your time, careful of the amount of time you spend alone, and also just to be a little bit more trusting with the world, because if it's just you and your English book, I think that you almost certainly will find some difficulties there. Right, that's it. That's just a few ideas about motivation. So I hope that's helped, and I'll catch you all again soon. Bye.